Okay, welcome back. We're page 430 talking about work breakdown structures, WBS. Start and end date is the schedule, but how many man hours are in there is what's called a level of effort, because start and end date could have one employee in that bracket or it could have 100 employees in that bracket, right? So start and end date is schedule, and amount of effort is how much it's going to cost. I said that backwards before. So what's the how many man hours is it going to take? And this is where I get my costing. And then any capital expenses, I got to buy shingles. I got to buy paint. I got to buy lumber, right? Okay. So it could be, non-capital and capital. I'm not worried about that in this case. Hardware cost, perhaps some software cost. Depends on it depends on how you put things together. But, it could be a reoccurring cost associated with something. And then non-capital. This is typically labor cost, right? So things you buy, and then your non-capital stuff, labor, some maybe software, depending on how your accounting people do things. Overhead, like office supplies and utilities and that kind of stuff. And then task dependencies. So things have to be done in the correct order. So if there is a particular order where the roof decking has to go on before the shingle people arrive, then that's what this dependency thing is all about. It all goes back to, before I can perform this step, I have to be able to do this. So I can't do penetration testing on a router that hasn't arrived. Okay, good. And of course, this will affect start dates, right? I mean, if you can't start the roofing until the deck is up, well, then, yeah, that's definitely going to change the start date. Okay, so project planning considerations, page 432. So here's the real key to any type of project, no matter what the project is, construction or putting in a new IDS or setting up a new firewall, is all the details are not known at the beginning. If you go back to this example of the waterfall, when you start this thing, you're thinking, I think I got a good handle on it. And by analysis, a little bit more. When you get to logical design, an awful lot more. So the amount of unknowns kind of shrinks, okay, as you go through. And hope it'll never go to zero. There's always going to be something you're going to surprise the heck out of you. Okay, so here's some of the considerations. Financial considerations. Did you do a cost-benefit analysis? Maybe that's required by your organization. Before you can go up to somebody and say, give me money for this project, you've done something that, like a business case, use case kind of a thing. And maybe it's approved through a separate budgeting process, right? And maybe well in advance. I mean, if you want to do something next year, maybe you need to have it in the planning cycle this year, kind of a thing. I don't know depending on how your business is done. And then the priority. Now, you can't do every project you want all at once. There's not enough money in the world to do that. So you need to prioritize. You need to prioritize it internally to yourself. Okay, we're going to do this project, then that one, then that one. And then somebody else has to say, well, now, wait a minute, this guy over here's got one that's just as important as yours, so we're going to slip it in between your project number 1 and your project number 2. So pick the most important task and, do it by risk assessment. That's how you determine importance. Time and scheduling, maybe delivery times. Maybe it's one of those things where this has to be done by the end of the fiscal year, or you can't work on it during the end of the fiscal year because we have way too much stuff. Like, for example, I'm sorry, you can't rearrange the store on, Black Friday. I'm sorry, you're going to have to work around these things. So delivery times, training, organizational requirements, because they may say, I'm sorry, the contracting office is not available to have anything else done. Those people are working overtime nonstop before the end of the fiscal year, so it's just impossible to do it. Staffing, grow your own, hire more people, maybe temps, right? Or just contract the whole freaking thing out, okay? So some things are just scream hire rather than in-house. And that would be like the initial firewall configuration. I want an expert, someone who has done this dozens of times, to come in and set up the firewall and then teach my people on how this thing works and then they leave. So I want to contract with somebody who actually has experience. I don't want to be, oh, let's see what it says on page 4, and it looks like we're supposed to. No. I want some confidence this thing is set up correctly. And the way you do that is you have professionals come in. Procurement. Maybe there's some sort of like if you're working for a state or federal government, there's probably some sort of rules for procurement. Maybe a dollar limit that if you exceed this amount, then it has to go to this approval process, that kind of stuff. Organizational feasibility. So security technology should really be invisible, right, in theory. But it may require new procedures, new policy, new training, new education. For example, if I'm going to turn on a two-factor authentication thing, and everyone's going to get a little security token that they have to carry with them at all times. What do you do when the person forgets it and leaves it at home? That kind of stuff. So there's an awful lot of organizational feasibility. If I've got a bunch of numbnut employees who just can't handle things, well, maybe I want to make them so incredibly simple because I can't have complex procedures or it just won't happen. Training and indoctrination. So conversion strategies, we're going to be talking about that in a minute. You don't ever just go, okay, now on Friday we're going to do it this way, and then when we come in on Monday we're going to do it a completely different way and have fun. That didn't work. So, if you're going to, you probably got to brief these changes to management to make sure they have, they've got your back, right? That kind of stuff. And then some sort of, maybe it's a compliance agreement. Like you have some sort of a federal system that says, we're compliant with, this FIPS, whatever. And then the scope. Okay, look, an awful lot of projects die because they're just too big. Instead of having one gargantuan project with 15 moving parts and cost $15 million, it might make sense to break off this little chunk over here, this little chunk over here, and we do that one first. Because keep it simple, stupid is a very good way of thinking. Large projects often fail because of their weight. There's just too much stuff going on, and you just can't keep it all straight in your head, particularly from a budget perspective. So on page 434, they say, the need for project management. Well, heck, I thought that was obvious. This is a unique set of skills and hopefully some experience. Again, certified, project management, or in the CompTIA world, the Project Plus, great way of doing things. There's a project management institute that has their own set of, it's called PIMP. It's not really called PRIMP, but it's professional project management professional. Anyway, it's PMP. Certification, and that basically says, okay, I've either had the training specifically or I've got a lot of experience on how to operate these things. So very, very useful skills. I keep trying to tell you that if you're planning on being a supervisor, okay, on whatever your job is, man, you probably need project management. You need that class. You need that certification. I'm sorry, you do. It's going to help so much. It basically tells you, how to communicate every step along the way to management, make sure they understand, to give them a sense of security that everything's being run well. I mean, fantastic stuff. Anyway, supervised implementation. So have a champion, somebody from management who says, yeah, I like this. The CISO or somebody who says, hey, this is my project and I want it implemented. Because if it comes down from management, then people are not really going to say, well, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. We ain't going to do it. I'm like, yeah, but it wasn't me. It was the CISO. Okay. Now, let me give you a crazy story. Now, this is unrelated, but just gives you the point. So at one time at Fort Hood, the 3 Corps commander came in and he was really, really, really excited about the recycle program. And so what he did is I ran the monthly recycle meeting up at his office. And he would invite people in from every organization and say, okay, tell me what you're doing on recycling. And, the next month it'd be another part of the organization. Well, it came one time for this organization to do their presentation. And so the guy came in, he's got his briefing materials, and the the general says, so, is Colonel Smith here today? And the guy says, well, yeah, I'm his second in command. And he goes, So he gets up, walks off to his office. We're standing around going, what? And he comes back in and he says, Colonel Smith will be giving the presentation next time. Thank you. You're dismissed. The guy just kind of stood there like, okay. Here's the point. If the 3-star says this is important, you don't send your second in command, okay? That was the point of the story. But it had a chilling effect. You got to believe that no one had pushback on recycle, because all you had to have said is these guys are not cooperating in the recycle program, and man, that guy's head would be torn off by the 3-star. He was passionate about this program. That's what we need. We need a champion for these programs. Someone who says, this is my idea, and doggone it, you're going to do it. You understand? Like, okay. Executing the plan. So, it's very possible that you have not really thought of everything, right? No, that can't possibly be. So, I start my plan. I determine what the current state is, compare where we are to where we're going to be, the gap analysis, as it's called. And then have I reached the goal? And if so, I'm kind of sort of done. Otherwise, I keep going. And so you could look at this as an iterative process, but most people kind of go through this and say, our goal is to, reduce, break-ins by 20%. I made that up. And so bottom line is, did it? Did it work? If not, you need to go back over and start over again, right? Kind of a thing. So gap analysis. Periodic check, that's good. See if you're on track. Are you moving towards the goal? This is called Earned Value Management. EVM is an entire chapter on that in the 4351. And sunk costs, costs you're not going to get back regardless. And then project wrap up. And so, collect all the documentation together, because somebody's going to have to be doing this similarly, or going to be doing it again at some other location, maybe a final report. You dismiss the team, you barred people of the organization, so you send them in. In my case, we had a party, right? Not much of a party. We took them to Olive Garden. And then an after-action report, the lessons learned, what went well, what went poorly. And in every single time you do one of these things, you probably need to go look and see what the previous ones were. Okay. So security project management certifications, page 436. So, highly prized certifications get really, really good pay, right? Okay. So we talked about this somewhat. There's a GIAC, Certified Project Manager, okay, mostly European, but it's okay. The EC Council IT Security Project Manager, okay. The Certified Security Project, and then the PMI one, the Project Management Professional, the PMP. If you got a PIMP, then that's really the gold standard here when it comes to project management. It's rigorous exam, and you have to have years of experience, but it's good. Okay, I probably shouldn't call it a pimp, because that's just degrading. It is. The project management professional is a fantastic. If I was going to be hiring someone to run a project, I'd put that in the job description. That's what I would do. Okay, technical aspects, page 437. So this is where, humans and technology collide. And we need to talk about, conversion strategies. I don't want to just say, stop, we're not going to do it this way, and then tomorrow we're going to start doing it another way. That's just a recipe for chaos. But this is probably a good place to stop.